Welcome to our second installment of our SMB expert series here on Story Loans. Today we have with us Greg O'Brien, the co-CEO of Anomaly. Greg co-founded Anomaly CPA with John Malone to specialize in working with entrepreneurial clients who have startups, high growth small businesses, and real estate investors that are growing into more complex tax and financial issues. Greg, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ray. I'm excited to get into some of the topics here and hopefully share some value with the audience.
So co-CEO, huh?
Co-CEO. So I'll give you a little background about us. We've been at this now for you just said 5 years at the end of 2023. Accounting background, master's in tax. Went into the public accounting world out of school, went to school up here in Boston, and then did that for a couple of years, kind of a traditional CPA firm life. Got sick of it, went into real estate development for about 4.5, 5 years, which is very cool. 2 different companies. One was more smaller scale shopping center. One was very large lifestyle type projects, but learned a ton during that time of my life. But along the way, having a CPA license and a master's in tax, I was like, I'm not really using this anymore. So kind of started the side hustle adventures back in probably 2016, 2017, just kind of doing stuff on the side. And then, just got very entrepreneurial and started out in 2018 and kind of the rest is history. So John, who's our co-CEO, we're both of us from the same college, went to school together, played football together. So I've known him for about 15 years now. John's a lawyer, so he went a separate route out of school. But over time, we came back together when I was about 2.5 years into this. He brings a lot of knowledge from the legal tax side of this house, but also just from an operations side of growing a business. He's kind of runs the operational aspects of the business. So we formed a great partnership a couple of years ago. And our team here at Anomaly, we have 33 people total. We are completely virtual. So there's 3 of us here in Boston. Everyone else is throughout the U.S., 15 different states we're in throughout the U.S. We also have a team abroad. So truly kind of digital, virtual, work with people wherever they may be. We work with people overseas. So we're kind of that new age model from an accounting firm's perspective. We've done it that way since the beginning. So COVID was really not a blip on our radar from a technological standpoint. It was just kind of business as usual. That's a bit of the background. From a services standpoint, we work with a few different groups. Number one, a lot of digital business owners. We use the term digital, meaning they work in the same way as we do. So maybe they're a digital-based company. Maybe they're just a company that operates remotely. We work with a ton of your traditional tech-based startups, right? So think R&D type companies, and then a lot of real estate investors or higher net worth individuals that have gotten into real estate development. So a lot of different verticals we work through, but really from a mindset perspective, we're looking to work with people that are growing in their careers, that are looking to get into more complex situations and things that we can really help them add value as they scale.
Well, it's interesting because you help small businesses, but you're also yourself a small business. Have you been scaling this organically or have you guys done any acquisitions?
No, that's a good question. It's 100% organic. Like literally started off in late 2018 with like a laptop and a WeWork office. And that was it, right? I'm kind of a marketing person at heart, actually, which is kind of weird for a tax person. And just kind of found some alternative ways to get the name out there in the early days. And you get some lucky breaks, some relationships from the past come up that really help you. And I always tell people getting into any type of business or even people that are starting a CPA firm, like, hey, you can't budget for like the unknown. There's just some good things that might happen along the way. So it's all been organic growth. I think one of the reasons we've grown pretty quickly from a team standpoint is just how we decided on day one to set this up being virtual. A lot of our peers in the CPA community struggled for the first year of COVID 2020 because they have very heavy physical infrastructure and they didn't have ability to hire remotely or have a team work remotely. So again, it was more from us at that point. It's like, hey, we can't hire quick enough. It's all been organic growth. And that's kind of how we like it in our industry, right? I want to make sure we're choosing the clients we want to work with that have the same values as us.
Yeah, so you were a little ahead of the curve there with the remote workplace, I guess, huh?
Yeah, and there's a lot of learning lessons for it. We don't have it all figured out. Trust me, we've made a million mistakes along the way with the remote work, and it's shifting all the time, right? There's the dynamics of that shift. It takes a lot of intentionality to grow a culture and build a company remotely, given that you don't see people every day. We do in-person events. We fly our team somewhere every year. I think it's really important to have a physical interaction from time to time because otherwise you have to be very, very careful about hiring people remotely and then putting them on an island. So you have to run the company differently, honestly, than you were doing if you were in person.
That's very smart. I agree 100% with that. We do that the same way here. What's new in tax, with regards to like the SMB space?
Yeah. So, I mean, timely podcast today. I know this won't be released today, but as of last night, Congress, the House passed HR 7204. There's some, made up name to it, but it's a bipartisan tax bill, which is extremely rare and is even more extremely rare in an election year to do this. The three things in here that are really big for business owners or small business owners, especially: number one, restoration retroactively of 100% bonus depreciation, right? So that's immediate deduction for capital assets at 100%. That's back to 2023, which is, again, bizarre because we're in 2024 and people are already filing their tax returns. So it's really big for real estate investors, but it's really even bigger for people acquiring businesses, and I guess we'll touch on that in a second. Number two, the restoration of 100% deduction for research and development expenses. So a weird change in the law happened in 2022, which was a phase in from the 2017 tax changes, where people that are engaged in research and development, right? So they might be building a product, they could be researching a disease, different things. They were barred from deducting those expenses. They had to amortize them over 5 years, which put people in a really big conundrum as far as capital went. And there's also increased child tax credits. I know that's not directly related to business. And then for real estate investors as well, there's some changes and benefits on the interest expense deductions, which would change as well. So that is not law yet, right? It has to pass the Senate, and the Senate looks good. President Biden has indicated he would sign it if it gets to his desk. So that would be really, really big for people that are acquiring businesses this year with the 100% bonus, but also people that acquired businesses last year. You probably underwrote that deal at 80% bonus depreciation. You're going to get a 20% kicker there on some of those assets. That could be really big. So we're really excited for that to move forward here. It's mostly good news.
Well, we love good news here at Story Loans. So thank you for bringing that to us. Let's get into some of that. What are some of the tax implications when structuring a business acquisition? I'd love to hear from the buyer side and the seller side, and just any nuance around that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our perspective on it is always unbiased because, we represent buyers, we've represented sellers, and, depending on what hat I'm wearing on a given day, or our team's wearing on a given day, we have different perspective on what we want to do. So the old adage is what's good for a buyer is not good for the seller, and what's good for the seller is not good for the buyer. That is mainly true, but you can structure win-wins. When you're acquiring a business, right, there's different ways to do it. In a traditional small business setting, you can just buy the underlying assets and IP of the business, or you can just buy the business, right? So you're either buying what's inside of the business, so think of the tangible and intangible assets, or you can buy the actual stock of the corporation or the interests in the LLC.
Asset purchase versus stock purchase, basically.
Exactly. So that's your two basic options, right? So before you even get into it, you need to figure out with counsel or with the buyer or seller, or whatever side you're on, what that structure is going to be. Here's why. If you're on the seller side of things, right? So you're selling your business. Number one is you need to understand what your entity structure is, right? So most small businesses are pass-through entities, meaning they are either a single member LLC disregarded. So people might call that a Schedule C, sole proprietorship. They're a partnership, right? So multiple people here, partnership, or they're an S corporation. Probably 8% of small businesses are structured. Now, there's also C corporations, right, which you don't see as much. So if you're in one of those pass-through entities, you can either sell the interest in those entities, right, so the underlying LLC units or interests, or you can sell the asset. So if you're selling the interest, generally speaking, right, without getting into the really nitty-gritty here, you're going to have mostly capital gain income, right? There's things like hot assets you got to look out for. There's different stuff that comes into it, but for the most part, you're going to get capital gain type income. Now, when you sell the stock, right, you're also selling the known and unknown liabilities of the company, meaning if there's like a lawsuit out there, right, technically speaking, if it's not known, right, it could be passed to the buyer. So sellers want to just, hey, we're selling this, right? We're selling you the actual entity. You're stepping into our shoes. You're taking our EIN. You're inheriting all the contracts. Truly like what you would think a business sale is. Now, a seller is like, great, I'm unloading. I'm getting mostly favorable tax treatment, mostly capital gain income here. Wiping my hands clean. I'm out. See you later, right? Okay, that sounds good for them. Now, if you're the buyer of that stock or that interest, you got to watch over a couple of things. Number one, capital gain to them, right, means it's not going to be as beneficial from you at acquisition, right? So you're going to not be able to deduct things right away on that purchase price. Number two, the stock thing is the liability portion, right? So I said known and unknown liabilities. You need to be very aware and do due diligence if you're going to buy the stock. And sometimes you can, do different things from a legal perspective, which we won't get into to mitigate this, but you need to be aware, right? If there's debt out there, what if there's a vendor, the seller has been screwing over, right, that you don't know about? They're going to come back, and they're going to come back after the entity, right? Because you're buying the entity. that's who's liable for the known and unknown liabilities of the company. So you got to be aware of that. You might have those things that are sitting out there. What if there's an employee that the other person had that comes back for a lawsuit 2 years later? They're going to sue the entity.
That's actually a really good point, because buyers will often say, well, there's going to be an indemnity clause in the contract, but you still have to deal with the lawsuit or whatever the issue is, and then sue the seller to go try to get that money.
Exactly right. So although you can mitigate the financial consequences of it, it's going to be a huge pain, right? You're going to still deal with that, right? So it can be very easy for the seller to do it that way. They often want to do it that way, but a typical buyer is going to push back there. Now, let's talk about one more thing on a stock sale. So again, this I mentioned that it's rather rare in the small business world, but if you're structured as a C corporation, right? So domestic, US-based C corp, there is one other thing you should be aware of. So C corps qualify for what's called Section 1202. Basically, what that means is that as long as you, when you acquired the stock in your corporation, which you probably are going to qualify here, had less than $50 million in assets on the balance sheet, it's domestic C corp's original issuance stock, meaning you didn't buy this stock from somebody else, you didn't buy it on the open market, and you've had this business or held the stock for 5 years, you can qualify for 100% exclusion on the gain of your sale, so long as you sold this in a stock sale, right? So you'll often see C Corp startups, right? This we deal with the startup world, that all they're trying to do, right, is grow user base and then sell. They don't even care about revenue because they're going to sell the enterprise value and potentially not pay tax on it. So it's a $10 million per shareholder gain exclusion. So if you literally start a business, it is a C Corp, you grow it to 10 mil, you sell it for 10 mil, you pay zero in taxes if you structure it as stock sale. Sounds great, right? Easier said than done. You got to convince the buyer, right? The buyer is going to want to make sure that, all these things we just talked about, those boxes are checked. There's traps for the unwary along the way with redemptions and whatnot. So pretty cool. And one other tidbit on that for people, if you're in that C Corp structure, if you don't make it 5 years, right? You just grow a C Corp and you sell it up to 3 years, you don't qualify for that, but you can do, it's called 1245, which think of it as a 1031 exchange, but for business, right? You can roll your qualified gain from your C Corp into a new C Corp that you start or into someone else's C Corp and defer your original gain, right? So pretty cool stuff are possible with C Corps. The problem with C Corps is that they may not be the most efficient thing to run an operating business. That's my spiel on stock sales. Now, let's talk about the asset sale. So the asset sale is what you're going to see. I don't have stats. I mean, you might know this more than I, Ray, as far as like percentages of what happens, but mostly we see asset sales, and asset sales for the seller, right? By the seller, you have to come to an agreement, hopefully before you sign it. We've seen people do this and not sign, right? They do this after the fact. You need to do what's called a purchase price allocation. So you're going to allocate, say it's $1 million sale, you're going to allocate the purchase price between classes, right? There's, I believe, 7 to 8 classes that the IRS uses. Each of those classes has a different tax consequence, right? So easy example here, you have an HVAC business that you're selling. Someone's buying the assets of the HVAC business. You need to divide the value between 7 classes. So you're going to have your typical, receivables that you might be buying. You might have inventory. There might be fixed assets. And then generally the delta between all of those things in your purchase price is going to be called intangible or goodwill. So from a tax perspective, right, I said what's good for the buyer is bad for the seller, and et cetera. Anything that's in those classes that's going to be considered inventory, it's going to be considered fixed assets, things like that. Any kind of price allocation to that is going to be ordinary income treatment. Anything into that goodwill bucket, right, that delta is going to be capital gain treatment, right? So you're breaking the tax aspects down. Flip side of that, right, if you're buying the business, you want to push as much as you possibly can into those fixed asset, inventory, ordinary buckets, because you get to write those off right away. Well, technically 80% under current law, but 100% if this other law changes, right? Those are 5 to 7 year assets, can be immediately depreciated. The delta, the goodwill portion, that's amortized over 15 years. You basically get to deduct the full purchase of the business over time. It's just a timing mechanism, right? We want to deduct things as soon as possible. Time value money, right? Take the deduction as soon as possible. So if I'm representing a buyer, I'm fighting to push things up fair market value, right? So push things fair market value up into those early asset classes. If we're at the seller, we're pushing as much as we can to goodwill, right? So what typically happens there, if you have a savvy buyer, savvy seller, or good CPAs on both sides of that transaction, you're going to make an adjustment to purchase price to whoever wins that deal, right? So if buyer gets what they want, maybe you adjust the purchase price a little bit, or vice versa. So That's typically what we're seeing.
Yeah, probably 80 to 90% of the deals that come across my desk are structured as asset purchase.
That sounds right. And I'll add one twist to it, right? We've seen this more and more actually in the last couple of years that, like I said, most small businesses are pass-throughs, right? So a lot of S corps out there. If you're buying an S corp, right, and you're starting a new business and you're going to buy an S corp, there's something you can do that's sort of the best of both worlds, but there's layers to it, and it's called 338H10 election. So basically, what you're doing here is it's going to be a stock sale that's treated as an asset sale. You need to have S corps on both sides of the transaction. So generally speaking, our buyer will set up a holding company. You're gonna have to have an S corp. Sometimes it's called a Q sub as well, which is a little bit another layer to this, but it can get done. And the reason you'd want to do this if it's S to S is that this election will allow you to transfer EINs and contracts, all that stuff, all that back office headache. So if you're buying a business that's super ingrained with customer contracts, EINs linked to a million different things, you might want to look at this option, the 338H10 structure, because what you can do there, right, is you're going to get this asset treatment that we just talked about, the whole allocation of everything. Great. I get to deduct my purchase price, but you get to also transfer these EINs, right? So all this kind of back office headache, because I did overlook that on the asset sale. That is a pain, right? That if you're buying a business that's been around a long time, you got to be aware that if you're going the asset route, you got to deal with EIN, deal with contracts. It's got to be a little messy. This is a nice medium sometimes. There are downsides to it, right? And there's other rules to it. But if you have a motivated buyer and a motivated seller and you're an S corp on both sides of that transaction, technically a C corp too, you can get it done.
Yeah, because tax and legal aren't the only things to consider. There's also the logistical transferring of the business. Most of the stock sales that I see, it's because they kind of have to be stock sales. They have 100 contracts with insurance companies or all these clients, and to go and transfer each one by one to the new entity, or maybe it's a license that's going to take some time to transfer to a new entity or whatever. So it's really a matter of understanding the business. Do people know this stuff that you're saying?
I would say, obviously biased to this, we have a decent amount of clients that are out there acquiring other businesses. Like they're just entrepreneurs, right? They just see opportunities. Like we have someone that's in the medical space buying your trades businesses, right? Like just entrepreneurs buying businesses. We have those frequent conversations in the model. We work in a kind of year-round model with our clients, so we're involved from the beginning. We have seen people that have come to us that have just bought in a business, and it's like, whoa, like what is this structure? I'd say it's pretty common where we see like people haven't even done that asset allocation yet, which you report on your tax return, but then it's like, hey, the buyer and seller are gonna you both file a form with the IRS. They have to match each other, right? Like you can't just make it up. So yeah, a lot of this stuff does get overlooked. I mean, I mentioned the whole QSBS 1202 C Corp thing. We've come across people in the last couple of years that have sold relatively profitable C Corps or not even profitable, high value C Corps without even knowing about this, right? Not reporting it properly. You can amend and fix this stuff. But just like you are in the SBA lending world, like we're so close to it oftentimes, we take for granted that this is just common knowledge, but oftentimes it's not. Sometimes it's because the counsel that's representing either the buyer or the seller is very legally motivated, which is fine. And the CPA that's involved doesn't get involved, right? Or they get involved too late. So, it's truly a team approach when you're working through these type of things.
What about when you're starting a business from scratch? Because I feel like when you're starting a business from scratch, you're very small and you know the least. You haven't done business. So what are the common mistakes you might see when you come across a startup entrepreneur?
Yeah, great question. So we work with a lot of them, right? So a lot of startups. I mean, there's two paths here, right? There's hey, I'm a startup small business. I'll call it a cash flow business, right? I'm growing this. It's going to be a lifestyle business. I want to make a lot of money. I want to grow and I want to help people. Cool. That's path one. Path two is starting this business and I have bigger plans. I'm selling to Google. I'm going venture route, right? So two different routes for sure. One of them, you're going to be the hustling with cash flow. The other one, you're taking in people's money, which is a whole nother line of stress to deal with. So we work with both of those groups. Starting a small business, I'm going to be a consultant. I'm going to open a shop. On those fronts there, I think that we often see people that are hamstrung by a lack of cash flow to start. They're putting their personal money and they have family obligations to meet. And I don't blame them whatsoever because I was there at one point. The owner wears 95 hats, right? They're marketing, their sales, their accounting, their legal, they're doing everything and they're trying to keep the lights on. It's very hard, right? So if you're just starting out, just do your best, get QuickBooks, start it, figure out, are you even profitable? Try different price points, right? So don't worry about having the most advantageous tax strategy on day one. Worry about making $1, right? That's what we always tell people. Start selling, sell, sell, sell. We'll figure out the tax stuff later. Just sell. There's definitely a point though in that entrepreneur's journey when you're running these cash flow businesses that you need to realize, okay, I've come to the point now where I'm getting traction. This is a viable endeavor. This is not a hobby. I'm doing this. We're going to grow. I need to start getting help, right? I need to start outsourcing. I need to hire a marketing firm if I'm not good at marketing. I need to hire an accounting firm for accounting and bookkeeping if I'm not good at that. I need to hire a business coach if I don't understand how to manage people or grow, right? So I am personally a big believer in that. We do it ourselves. We hire business coaches, we hire marketing agencies, right? Like the things that it's on our core competency, I'm outsourcing those because it's not worth my time as a business owner to do things I don't understand, right? So we often try to tell business owners, hey, you go save the world. You're creating this product that cures something or doing this thing, like go do that, worry about that. Let us worry about this back office stuff, right? And so I think of the world in the same way. So I think that's really important. Now, if you're going the other way, you're saying, hey, I'm going to start this and I'm going to take on institutional capital. I'm going to grow this. You got to go professional from day one. Trust me on that. Even family and friends type money, got to get professional help right away on legal, on accounting, everything, because very quickly, and we see this all the time, very quickly, there's going to be other people that have their eyes all over your stuff. And they're going to be questioning stuff because you're basically acting as a fiduciary for other people's money. So on our tech type startups, we're working with them from formation, really. You don't want to wait until it's too late on that kind of stuff. Or if you're looking at a potential investor, right? If I'm looking at buying a business or investing in a business and I see spreadsheet stuff, I'm going to be like, there's something wrong here, right? So there's two paths there. We try to guide people on which side they should go.
Has somebody come to you who had recently started a business on that bigger scale where they already kind of set something up where it was like almost like irreversible or you had to make a big change?
It's generally always reversible, right? Like what we'll see on those type of things is like a lack of knowledge and compliance on the tax side, right? A lot of people have this misconception that, hey, I started this corporation, I'm scaling it, I'm inventing some crazy AI thing, but I've just been burning cash, haven't done anything with the IRS yet. It's like, well, a C corporation, right? It's not like some other entity types. You have to file a tax return and you have to do all the compliance, even if you don't make a buck. So there's a decent compliance lift. We work with a lot of people that have international ownership. Don't mess with that, right? If you have international situation going on whatsoever, all you got to know about that is IRS will impose, and they do impose pretty stiff penalties for non-compliance there. So some of it's just education of, hey, I know you're not making money, so you don't think about tax, but you still have a tax obligation for a compliance perspective, right? So that's super, super important. Oftentimes, right, we get involved all the time. I mean, you get someone that's like, I've tried to manage my QuickBooks. We grew very quickly. I've neglected it for a year. That's all. It's all fixable, right? Like you're going to pay for it, but it's all fixable. Unfortunately, sometimes it's like, hey, someone wants to invest in my company, but like we need reconciled balance sheets for the last 3 years tomorrow, right? It's like, well, that's probably not going to happen.
Did you watch Schitt's Creek?
I have not. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't watched it.
There's a funny scene in there where the guy is like opening a little boutique store and he's just like, write it off. I'll just write it off. And he just keeps saying, I'll write it off. And his dad's like, you still have to pay for it, right?
So now you say that I had a client actually send me that clip on YouTube.
That's the best clip.
It is. We were sending it around our team last fall, and when we saw that, yeah, it's that is like a funny concept, right? It's like small business owners, right? You can get too obsessed with tax as well, right? And at the end of the day, right, we look at it as like, what's the return on overall investment here, right? There's blocking and tackling tax strategies everyone should be deploying. That is a great return on your investment. It's not a great return on most people's investments to buy a Hummer, right, in December, because it's just a bad investment, right? So you got to be careful of that falling into that trap of just burning cash to save tax because you're still burning net cash, right? Now, there's other things, right, that don't cost you money that are valuable, right? If you understand how to use leverage with buying assets that you need, taking advantage of bonus depreciation. Small business owners qualify for what's called QBI, Qualified Small Business Income Deduction. Sounds easy, right? It's like, oh, this is 20% haircut. There's so many nuances to that where we see people come in where their accountant or their TurboTax has checked some boxes incorrectly. They're leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table, or they didn't structure their business correctly internally and they're leaving money on the table for these things, right? So we always say like the government puts these things out there, right? They are incentives in the tax code, but they're not going to knock on your door and say, hey, you didn't claim the incentive, like, so we're just going to give it to you. You got to go get it, right? So you got to get educated or find someone that's educated to go get them for you. And you need to optimize throughout the year. If you wait till late December to do something, it's too late. If you wait till the time you're filing your taxes, there's very little you can do, right? You're looking at going backwards at that point. So we want people that are active in their situation, that are interested in this kind of stuff, because look, we tell people all the time, hey, $1,000 savings over 10 years, that's 10K. Put that at a 7% growth rate. Like, you're saving that's $20,000 over a decade. Like, you could do other things with that with your family, reinvest it, right? So don't forget about the blocking and tackling, but be very careful not to fall into the trap of just buying things, right? I mean, that can be a dangerous trap.
How closely do you work with your client? What's your business model look like?
Yeah, great question. So for the most part, no one's competing with each other, right? Like, I'm a part of so many groups. John and myself are just in Florida for a week with 8 other firm owners, right? And we're helping each other grow. So it's very much a community-based approach that the CPAs are. Now, I'm saying like us smaller firms, right? I don't know what the Big Four does, but we're very much in it together, right? So we help each other grow and throw out crazy business ideas. So what's unique about our model, like after meeting so many different other CPAs, is that we are a subscription-based model. So we work with people throughout the year. The offerings are going to be anything from your simple bookkeeping to accounting, to more complex accounting things like, forecasting, budget management. And we do all sorts of back office support from payroll, APAR type of stuff as well, the boring stuff, but mainly making sure, right, the owner needs their information in a concise manner to make decisions, right? They don't need to know all the weeds of the accounting. They need the information, right? So give them that information from an accounting standpoint. And then tax advisory first, right? So we're very big on advisory first, compliance second. So an active approach throughout the year to make sure that we're actively managing with the business owner or owners their tax situation. We're deploying the tax strategies that are proper for them, and we're maintaining them. And when, hey, things happen like today, like, trust me, we're getting information out to our clients today on these tax law changes that might be going through, and that things they might consider, or maybe we need to slow some things down with the filing, right? So we take a very active approach, and I think this is something that's unfortunate, but 90 to 95% of our incoming inquiries, on their inquiry form, they say that their current CPA takes like a month to get back to them, or just doesn't at all, or just like it's like never gets back to them. And having been in like the bigger CPA world, I mean, part of the problem is firms are set up in this model of hourly billing. They're set up in a model of compliance where they need 5,000 tax returns to make it work. And the ratio of a staff to a client can be upwards at big firms, 1,000 clients to 1 staff. How can you possibly have a relationship with somebody if you have 1,000 relationships, right? Never mind your personal relationships. So we had to think about it very differently when we set this up, because we never wanted to end up like that. So we have a pretty hard rule that we don't want any staff managing more than 30 relationships. So 30 to 1 ratio. I think that's doable. You can be active, you can have conversations, and you can really get to know what you're working on. So that's how we've set things up in this subscription-based model. Again, for the people we're working with, mainly millennial age business owners for the most part, they're used to that model, right? They want a known price. They want to know what's involved, what the price is, versus, well, hey, like, it's going to be made up dollar per hour that we'll figure out the hours later, right? So that's kind of our personal opinion on it, and how we have set things up.
Give me a general sense of the state of small business right now. Do you hear businesses closing? Do you hear businesses growing? Is access to capital a problem? Are there any trends that you're noticing in your conversations?
That's a great question. So I would say that for the most part, we have an optimistic view on things. During 2023, we definitely saw a slowdown on the startup VC side of things. There was less venture capital in our small sample size, less venture capital deployed than we had seen. It was really like a COVID boom during those years, right? With deploying of capital into tech startups. Definitely saw that heighten a little bit. I think there's optimism there. You might see some rates go down a little bit, so that might be more optimistic to get more money deployed on the venture side. Real estate wise, 2023 was definitely a slowdown in larger transactions. A lot of our real estate investors are holding their cash, not literally holding their cash, but they're, keeping on the sidelines, see how things play out a little bit. I think that there's some people that might have gotten a little bit of hot water per se with, their floating interest rates that have, caused some problems. We just don't have many office investors at all. And I just know there's a lot of turmoil in the office world right now on the real estate side. 2022 and 2021 was like the biggest short-term rental boom we've ever seen, right? Like tons of short-term rentals. We still saw short-term rental investing in 2023. It was more targeted to the people that do it, right? That like, hey, I'm a short-term rental investor. It's what I do. Less of people just buying it one time, right? When the getting's good. So I think 2024 will be much the same in the real estate world. There's going to be a little bit of uncertainty with the rates. Some of these hot asset classes that there's a massive appreciation in, probably going to see some sales of that on the real estate side. Now, the last sector here is like the small business world. I do have a lot of optimism there. I mean, our clients are doing well. Again, we're mostly B2B type businesses we work with, right? So they're business to business services. I think that there's a lot of optimism there. I'm also continuing to see this, what I call the blue collar boom. A lot of entrepreneurs, right, that we work with that might own some unrelated business that are getting very interested in buying trades businesses, buying home-based service businesses. And that generation is mainly baby boomer owned. So those M&A transactions, I think, will continue to happen. And I think that there's a great opportunity there. I personally think there's a great opportunity to buy some of those businesses and digitize them, meaning I think we've all been in the situation where we deal with a plumber or something and they're like, hey, you got to, write a check to me. And I'm like, I haven't seen my checkbook in 3 years. So, I think there's a great opportunity to buy some of those businesses and digitize their marketing and their CRM systems and just increase, the value of those businesses. So I do continue to see a lot of our clients talking about that. So I would predict that would continue to grow.
I think that is here to stay for sure. Thank you so much, Greg. This has been extremely insightful. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. I think this is a great time. Anyone wants to get in contact with us, you can go to anomalycpa.com and you can connect with us there.
And we'll leave those notes in the show notes below. Thank you again.